So thank you. So can we have the slides off, please? And the panelists all up and visible. Thank you. And we can have a discussion now. We have a question from Aisha, who asks how we build trust between university TTOs and big pharma. I think we can take it a little bit broader than that and say big industry. So who would like to start that one off? Christian.
I'll be happy. Yeah, I noted that down when I think Aisha sent that right at the beginning. There are a lot of ways, and it does not need to be overcomplicated. I think tech transfer, as part of the culture of innovation, needs to have a mutually beneficial relationship with the researchers. And if the researchers understand this is in their interest, it can benefit them. For example, we've worked with a number of universities which have done very well simply by encouraging their researchers to instigate and build relationships with scientists from industry at the scientific meetings. Then for them and for the TTOs, I would say follow up, build the relationships, invite them to drop in when they're in your city or region. Do what you'll say you're going to do, so value the relationship. I'll give you an example. At a TTO meeting in the US, a tech transfer meeting, a friend of mine who runs business development, or ran for a big pharma, accepted 20-some meetings with tech transfer officers who requested the meetings. He took notes on every meeting. He sent full emails the following week to each of them with recommendations, questions, follow-ups. He got 3 replies from TTOs who had requested those meetings in the first place. This is unfortunately not surprising. So ask them questions. I always tell startups and spin-outs, if you have a project and you want to engage with industry, talk to them early on. It's literally free consulting, which is better than any local advisor you can hire. If you ask them questions and listen to the responses and follow up, update them, even if you're 2 years away from a deal, build that relationship. It's free mentoring and guidance, and they get to know you. And then they're more likely to come and visit you and meet other researchers and people at your institution or university. I didn't address properly why I like that try-TDI model. And I saw Orla, yes, I've seen a number of wonderful things in Ireland. But I like this model because it was quite early. And what they did was, instead of trying to convince Takeda to trust them, what Takeda didn't trust, or industry doesn't trust, is the early drug development. They're okay with the discovery coming from academia. So what Takeda would do is they would do the drug development at industry standards, and therefore they trust the results. So it's a quite beautiful, elegant solution. But I would engage, maximize contacts, value the relationship, do what you're going to say, and put somebody in charge of that relationship. Even once you have an alliance in place, put a relationship manager, because if the vice-rector retires, you lose continuity and things can disappear, right? And people do change in tech transfer as well, more often than vice-rectors, frankly.
So thank you for asking me to retire. I'm very grateful to you for that.
Pardon me, Jonathan.
Quite right, but let's have another 20 minutes until the end of this call, and then I'll go. Orla, do you want to pick up on that?
Well, no, other than to say that I agree entirely with everything that Christian said. In terms of building trust, it's about committing to a relationship. It's about investing time, putting people there at all levels. It's about delivering, about saying what you're going to do. It's about communicate. You know, before you get into a relationship, as you build it, after you finish the project, it's all about the communication, the delivery, the relationships.
Fantastic. Okay, yes, Christophe.
Yeah, just a short comment on that. I think it's important also for the TTO people to be skilled and serious and to know about what a company is. So avoid fantasies. You know, that's one of the problems that big groups, some you know, they tell university, go look, you're just dreamers. You think we are going to make billions, and so you want your share, but this is not the way it goes.
Yeah, you know, unrealistic expectations have often been very difficult problems in this relationship between academics and industry. I want to come on to a broader theme that came out of this, or a couple of those themes. I mean, we're enjoying the worst pandemic for a century, probably the worst economic recession for more than a century. And I think all of us on this call would agree that universities are part of the solution to both the pandemic and the economic recovery that we all seek. But how do we persuade governments and industry of our crucial role?
Can I take a brief comment on that? And say, I think it's important to recognize in many countries budgets are absolutely constrained. I know in some, the universities were told by the governments in April, whatever you haven't spent this year, send it back, we need it for the health system, right? In other countries, there's been an increase because they were able to. But we are seeing the examples. Right now, for this meeting that we're putting together in May, we're rounding up technology. Some you'll have seen. We might have the people behind the UCL respirator. There is an institute that spun out of Rutgers with $100 million and now has got a $3-4 billion market cap in 1 year, based on they had the first approved saliva test for COVID. That's Infinite Biologics. There is a company that spun out of Universidad de los Andes in Chile, where they took copper-based nanoparticles and built them into a mask, which kills 99% of virus particles within 2 minutes of contact. So it doesn't just filter, but it kills viral particles. There is a volatile organics compound company out of Singapore, which is in earlier development as essentially a breathalyzer test for COVID. There are any number of immuno-oncology companies and research programs that have pivoted to virology and drugs that are off-label, generic drugs that are being repurposed. So I think we're at a wonderful time to demonstrate the power in the life sciences. Before I leave, because I know other people want to comment on this, I want to address something from Christophe, from Ioana, from François. I put a note in, sometimes the metrics are very important, but they're hard when we look at social sciences, humanities, and arts, but you can see results. There are programs I'm familiar with where they've had music classes or art classes for terminal cancer patients, between a local university and the hospital system, and significantly improved outcomes. Now, how you monetize that, I don't think it needs to be monetized, right? But that is a valuable exploitation of knowledge, of expertise, and arts, humanities, social sciences can collaborate on these things. And I think we need to go cross-silo.
Thank you, Christian. That's very important that you said that. We've just finished every 6-7 years, the British government has a research assessment exercise, which is the world's largest peer review process. And we have to show impact from all of our areas, including the arts, humanities, and social sciences. And it's exactly that sort of impact. Ioana.
I just wanted to answer very quickly to your question, is that one of the problems in discussing with the government from an SSH point of view is that we are very, very fragmented. I think part of the solution must come from the upper level of the university to unify, help your scholars in the SSH to speak with each other. And this joins what has been said about cooperating within the university. It's one of the plagues in the SSH. There are so many small chapels between the historians. If you are in the medieval studies, you will probably not speak very much with those who are studying the 20th century. It's a bit caricatural what I'm saying, but not entirely. And this leads to lack of a message from these people towards government and towards more likely stakeholders. And this is, to me, key to make governments understand that part of the pandemics is societal. We see that people cannot stay home anymore. While this is the key, it would be one of the keys until we have vaccines for everybody, because in other countries such as France, we have not been so foresighted as to buy enough vaccines. But the key will be the societal management to overcome this pandemics, which is probably not finished soon. So this is what I wanted to say.
Thank you, and quite right too. Karin.
Yes, what was the question? How can we show governments? Or I think that what we need to do is to recognize what is already going on everywhere in universities. And I mean, where I come from, we collaborate with lots of different organizations. So in my view, I think someone talked about that. It's about storytelling and to really storytell research in new ways. And I've been experimenting with conducting videographies like documentaries, using photo, using pods, etc. And I think it's basically about, you know, showing what we do when we do research and how it can benefit society in different aspects.
Yeah. I think we need some of those metrics as well. That's the problem. You need the anecdotes because they capture the human imagination, but you need the data, otherwise nobody takes it further.
I know that is what we hear, but it's where I come from, and if we take the perspective of the humanities and the social sciences, this is really, really important. And what is thrown at us often is you know, that we need to have measures, etc. So what I try to focus on and emphasize in the presentation is how we can come together on that. And I think that the other part is equally important. So it's as well about, you know, telling these stories and finding other outlets.
Yeah,
that's you know, my experience.
Yeah, no, sure.
Thank you.
Christophe.
Yes, interdisciplinarity, this is extremely important. I'm discovering that in Luxembourg because I was in France before, and health is a perfect example. Luxembourg is a very strong country about data and security about data, and digital health is, you know, it's a boulevard. So that this could be going to be very important. So nothing is really only SSH. I mean, SSH in my university, I mean, they used data software, database. They are very tech, if you think about it. And the other way around, you need, you know, monitoring the COVID in wastewater. You need new molecules, obviously, but you need specialists of psychology and etc. So it's all integrated, very, very interlinked.
Yep, that's very good. Orla.
Just to add to what colleagues have said, in making the case to government for support of higher education and research, it's very important that industries make that case as well as us, or indeed sometimes for us. Sometimes when we make the case, it is expected that we will be saying this, but when our industry partners, and that's another reason why our relationships are so important, when our industry partners make the case for our needs, that is much more effective in many cases.
Yeah, I think that's a critical point. Thank you. It's not making our own case, it's having others make it for us. That is extremely persuasive. And it's in doing that we can point out the power of relationships between academia and industry, both ways. Both ways. I chair a UK government panel that tries to get increasing flows, academics going into industry and industry people coming into academia. The first has been relatively easy. The other direction has been much more difficult. And I don't think it's all about salaries. I think it's about expectations and terms and conditions and culture and all these very challenging issues. Good. So then let's come back to metrics. Because in the end, although the stories, the anecdotes are powerful, and if you turn around and say, we started Microsoft, everyone thinks you're wonderful. Most of us don't do that very often. We sort of had a little discussion around this, and I wasn't quite clear. I mean, to my mind, the long-term outputs of this that persuade governments, particularly during difficult times, that investment in the interface between industry and universities, and persuade universities and industry of this, are things like money made, jobs created, products generated, markets opened up, ecosystems supported. But maybe I'm being too medically mechanistic. What does the panel think?
Can I comment before deferring to the metrics experts? I mean, looking at this from a perspective of let's go into a university that has a goal or an objective and help achieve that in terms of engaging with industry. I've seen the conversation about patents for years, and the reality is, as Christophe said, it's not necessarily the right metric, and some institutions have more budget for patenting and they patent everything, so it leads to a distortion. Licensing deals can also be the same, because some institutions are doing dozens or hundreds of licensing deals with local industry that doesn't have the capacity to develop anything in some cases. We can look at others where, having gone in with an international advisory board to a small university in Spain that had never done a single life sciences sector serious licensing deal, we identified a technology for which there was no intellectual property at all, and had a clinician behind it that felt commercialization was evil. And 5 years later, this had been a spin-out company, had been set up, angel funded, partnership with a $9 billion market cap NASDAQ rare diseases company, now financing the clinical development. I think that's a record in time for Spain, and probably for many countries around the world in terms of speed. That's one licensing deal they have, right? They had hundreds of patents. They had one licensing deal, but it will succeed. I mean, well, the clinical trials may not fail, but in terms of the objectives. So we need some flexibility to adapt. And if we look at those examples of where art classes or music classes can improve patient outcomes of terminally ill patients, that is not something that you can measure systemically. It's on a case-by-case program, right? It's a clinical outcome measurement. So again, I'm not an expert on the metrics. We need them, because if you're not measuring, you're not managing. But it's very important to select the right ones. And if you look, for example, in Europe, something like EIT, right, the European Institute of Technology and Innovation, they have their KPIs for the EIT as a whole. Then they have their, the health specific or food or agriculture specific key performance indicators. And even those, it's hard to fit them across the board to each project, right? So I admire what those of you working on this are doing. It's a challenge, but it does need to be addressed.
Ioana?
Well, we are at the end of the webinar, so I will make a very shocking affirmation. Metrics are easy. What is not easy is to know what is your societal vision, what you want from your institution. And I'm sorry to say it, but in many countries is also a matter of political vision about what you want from your universities, what your university system is about too. Because if you are setting as a goal that I want that my university in my capital be in the QS Simons or in Shanghai top university, this is not a societal goal. This is nothing. And in many cases, again, I'm sorry to say, this is what policy about university boils down, policy about researchers boils down. So I think set your priorities first, and metrics will come in a way or another. They will be easier or less easier to collect, and in some cases you will have technical problems so as to know where to find information and how to collect it on a consistent base, but that can be solved. The first thing is what you do, what you want to know. And the second question to ask for everybody is, once you know, what do you do with the knowledge? Because if you have measures, you know you have a problem, but you have no intention of correcting whatever, or no intention of acting upon that, or even maybe discovering that you are part of the problem, the one who asked for the measure, there you have a bigger problem too.
Okay, very good. I think that last word about being clear on your strategy and your culture, and then using that to persuade university colleagues and industry to interact, is a very good note to end on. Thank you, colleagues, very much for a brilliant discussion. Wonderful presentations. What a star panel. And I'm going to hand back to Luciano, who will finish the meeting.
So thank you very much, Jonathan, for chairing so well this fantastic panel. Thank you for the exceptional speakers, for the really excellent presentations, to the participants also for being with us. let me say that we will continue this series of events related to research in UNICA. Let me mention that we have another one also quite interesting coming up on the 6th of May. It's about human resources strategy for researchers at UNICA member universities. We will have an introduction by Apostolia Caramali, head of unit of the European Commission, and then we will continue with cases from University of Belgrade, Université Libre de Bruxelles, Université of Tübingen, because this event will be done in cooperation with CIVIS, one of the new alliances of European higher education area. Again, at the Universidad Autónoma de Madrid, University of Warsaw, and Sapienza University of Rome. So I hope that some of the participants will join us on the 6th of May, 10 a.m. I send the link in the chat, and I think will be another amazing event. And also we are in touch with the EPO, with European Patent Office. As you know, they have a very interesting academy, and we are discussing about offering to UNICA members the possibility to benefit from what the Academy of EPO is actually doing. I think that's an interesting activity as for our young researchers, for also our officers at the TTO facilities. And so we will continue on that. And of course, also with the other activities, as you know, UNICA is active on anything that we feel that is important for universities. It is actually tackled by UNICA nowadays, mainly online, but we hope in the future to go back to also in-person meetings. We will have a General Assembly coming up in June and many different activities of the working group. So again, I also encourage the participants to look at the website of UNICA, which recently was completely revised and improved. And we try to really do as much as we can for our members. So thanks again to all of you, and see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.